Hello and welcome to the 3D Blu-ray Bunker. This is a place for us die-hard fans of 3D where we exclusively look at 3D Blu-rays and almost entirely focus on the quality of the 3D on offer, with just a short comment at the end about the film itself. And hopefully by the end you'll have a better idea about whether this one might be worth adding to your 3D collection. And today we're looking at Hercules, Brett Ratner's 2014 film starring Dwayne Johnson. It's worth a quick mention here of the phenomenon, if phenomenon is the right word, of what's known as twin films, where different studios release similar films around the same time. Some of the better known examples of this are Armageddon and Deep Impact, Ants and A Bug's Life, Tombstone and Wyatt Earp, or more recently there was Abominable and Smallfoot. There are loads of them, you know the sort of thing. Anyway, Hercules is one of these twin films, its partner being Renny Harlin's Legend of Hercules from the same year. What makes these a little bit more interesting from our point of view is that, and I think this may have been a first, they were both released in 3D. Unlike Legend of Hercules though, this film was shot in 2D and post-converted to 3D. The aspect ratio of this one is 2.39 to 1. As per the stills that I'll be putting up here, I always put up shots from films in their correct aspect ratio. So it's pretty clear to me that this film's 3D conversion wasn't any kind of last-minute afterthought, because the composition throughout the film suggests that not only did they plan for it from early on in production, but they took it pretty seriously too, making plenty of effort to make it work well. The film introduces Hercules with a flashback of sorts to a few of his 12 labours, and here we get a scene where he's up against a wild boar, and in this moment the big pig smashes into a tree and the splinters come out of the screen in a piece of clear and slow pop out. It's really well done, and I always find it reassuring to see 3D this strong early in the film. And equally strong is this view deep inside the Nemean lion's mouth, which is another really outstanding bit of 3D. You can feel the depth of his mouth, and it's a good sign that the film knows what it's doing and that it's going to deliver. We also get this swampy scene at the beginning, and what struck me about this was that it was possibly a really clever piece of planning because of the relative simplicity of the vines, especially the main pillar-like ones, which I think meant that they could be converted to 3D far better than if it was a busy jungle type of foliage scene filled with thousands of branches and leaves. It's a similar sort of thing in this later scene. It's still fairly busy, but it's a lot less complex than vegetation can be. Grass, flowers and leaves, they're always a bit tricky, but it looks fantastic here. In fact, a brief moment that isn't so successful, by way of an example of what I'm trying to get at here, is this foreground tree, which looks like it was far too full of branches and twigs to convincingly convert. So this is actually a moment in the film where native 3D filming could have produced significantly superior results, I think. But this is no criticism at all of the film's 3D. By the way, Dwayne Johnson has long hair in this film, unusually, and his normally bald head would presumably be easier for 3D post-conversion, so gave themselves a little bit of extra work there. Hercules shoves his club towards us here, and it comes far out of the screen, and this is just one of many of the film's excellent pop-out moments. There are several of these courtesy of Dwayne Johnson, and one of the best of them I think is this bit with his spear. It's one of those shots that many 3D naysayers like to refer to as a gimmick shot, but cinema's been doing this sort of thing for hundreds of years in thousands of 2D films, and I've never once heard anyone call those out as gimmick shots. This spear is held, and the shot held, for a good long moment, so there's plenty of time to fully appreciate the huge amounts of negative parallax on display here. And it's not the only shot of this type here either. We get a flaming spear, again not one of the typical 3D pop-out shots that only last for a few frames, because this is nice and slow for a real 3D thrill. I suppose actually that I would almost accept that this one is a little bit of a gimmicky shot really, but I'm happy to embrace it because it's so good. There are some pop-out moments that do only last for a few frames, but even like where this knife comes out towards us, whilst it's over extremely quickly, the knife is on a trajectory that's flat enough for those few frames to work better than shots like this often do. They managed to get plenty of space here in between the embers of the fire. I suppose in a way this is a reasonably simple bit of conversion, as you've just got simple small specks of light against a dark background, but then again there are a hell of a lot of them, so swings and roundabouts I guess. Anyway, it's another nice nice early shot in the film. This shot of Hercules and his team riding into town is fantastic. It's got really strong depth, and like every shot in the film, the 3D is obvious. It's powerfully done here, but there's never a moment in the film where it feels weak or even unnoticeable, which can unfortunately be the case with some films. So when they arrive at their destination, the 3D composition kicks into overdrive, because from here on the film is filled with shots like this, scenes that absolutely lend themselves to good 3D, and Stereo D, who did the conversion here, has a good time taking all of these shots and stretching the 3D about as much as I think was possible. All of these lines of troops with their natural depth and perspective make for fantastic 3D, and we get to see a lot of them throughout the film. And whilst rows of troops look superb in 3D, rows of troops holding spears look even better, and there are plenty of shots like this in the film, and the solidity, separation and depth is always extremely good. Landscape shots aren't massively hyper stereo, but they still have a really pleasing amount of layers and depth, like in this view here, which still looks to me to be notably more three-dimensional than the natural real-life view would be. From a composition point of view, it's not just the troop formations that allow for great 3D, but it's one of those films that feels like pretty much every shot has been set up for 3 dimensions. Sometimes interior shots in 3D films can be less impressive than the exteriors because of the limited size and sometimes the limited amount of staging of the sets. But here the sets, whether they're practical or virtual, are really cavernous and well packed with props and people and stuff. And this dinner table, in fact, is a really great example of how good 3D can bring out extra detail by separating the various elements fully out. It's one of those shots where if you briefly close one eye to see how it looks flat, it's almost shocking how in 2D it massively reduces the amount of spatial sense that it makes. There's a really nice wide stereo shot of this stadium which looks amazing. It's deep and strong, and it almost makes it feel like they've individually depth mapped every single person's body, which I'm sure isn't the case. Anyway, it's extremely effective, and this is the shot that I would pick as my favourite in the film. And even when the film's ended, there are still some nice 3D treats left for us, with the main credits playing out over some nice artistic CG paintings, recapping some of the main points of the story that we've just watched. It's a nice touch, and it's really the icing on a cake of an excellent 3D presentation, and it's one which, for the quality of the 3D alone, I think it definitely deserves a place in every 3D Blu-ray collection. So a very quick word on the film. I enjoyed it enormously, way more than I thought I would. If you're hoping for a solid portrayal of the 12 labours of Hercules, then this film won't really deliver that, as it's not the Hercules film that you might expect, if you had any expectations, because it completely deconstructs the classic Hercules mythology, but in a way that's entirely pleasing. It's great fun, as well as surprisingly funny in places. It's got a good cast of characters, all nicely drawn, and a really impressive bunch of classy supporting actors, who I think raise the level of acting to well above what I would have assumed would be on offer here. So you've got the likes of John Hurt, Ian McShane, Joseph Fiennes, Rufus Sewell, Peter Mullen, Rebecca Ferguson, all hitting the right tone, and Dwayne Johnson leads the way perfectly well. In fact, I enjoyed this film so much that I immediately ordered the slightly longer extended cut, even though I expect that when I do get around to watching that one, I'll find myself missing the fantastic 3D of this version. So I hope you found this in some way useful, and if so, I hope you'll join me again soon for another 3D Blu-ray review. Until then, thanks for looking in on this one. Cheers for now. Bye bye.